Hello and welcome everybody to Hidden History. Today we are going to look at the 1893 World's Fair. One of the biggest questions that surround the World Fairs, as with the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, was how they were constructed in such a short time, with huge elaborate neoclassical architecture. The 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition was built at record speed and built faster than it could have been today, with no machinery and limited tools. The Columbian 1893 Exposition started construction on the 24th of January 1891 and was finally opened during the 1st of May 1893. The fair lasted 6 months until the 31st of October 1893. After this, all the edifices were pulled down. This World's Fair was planned as the grand opening for the United States of America, which marked the Industrial Age, just like the 1851 Great Exhibition was for London in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. According to the official narrative, the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition was designed to follow Beaux-Arts principles, namely by using neoclassical architecture based on symmetry, balance and splendour. Buildings at the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition were predominantly designed by John Wellborn Root, Daniel Burnham, Frederick Law Olmsted and Charles Bowler Atwood. Now that is of course possible, but once you look more closely into the 1893 World's Fair, you begin to realise that it is very possible that some of the buildings were actually from the old world empire of Great Tartary or Great Tartaria. So today we are going to go through the construction photographs of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition that were released in the past 2 years at the Chicago Public Library. There are quite a few unseen images in these photographs. All of them were taken by Charles Dudley Arnold, who documented the construction of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition from the 24th of January 1891 until the 30th of April 1893. This is the concise view before everything was constructed over it. This is where the agricultural building of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition was constructed. These are the Palace of Fine Arts construction photographs, and this building still exists today. So the question is, were these buildings already here prior to the construction of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, and was this World's Fair actually showing remnants of the old world empire of Great Tartary or Great Tartaria? The full site of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair covered 690 acres, featuring 197 temporary buildings of mainly neoclassical architecture, with 27.3 million American citizens passing through here. It had the first ever Ferris wheel, midway plaisance, electrical, cultural and educational exhibits and much more, showcasing the United States of America over that 6-month period. In the given narrative, they claim such buildings were constructed from wood and then covered in fibre reinforced plaster mixture called staff. But what about the building foundations at the 1893 World's Fair? Even if this structure was built from wood, it would need a foundation, especially with over 27 million American citizens recorded passing through the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition. The 1893 World's Fair was one of the largest and most ambitious world fairs and competed with the Great Exhibition of 1851, which was held in Hyde Park in central London, England. Interestingly, the 1893 Columbian Exposition was also built in somewhere called Hyde Park, which was a landmass that was developed from 1853 in Chicago, which was 2 years after the Great Exhibition of 1851. Is this merely a coincidence that both of these important world fairs were built in Hyde Park? The land for the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition was purchased by Paul Cornell, a wealthy real estate speculator and brother of Ezra Cornell, founder of Cornell University. Ezra Cornell had made his fortune inventing a steam-driven trench digging and laying machine for telegraph wires, an innovative modern technology that became obsolete due to subterranean electrical conductivity issues. Then, later, Ezra Cornell founded Cornell University, while brother Paul Cornell used his wealth to buy expanses near Chicago, which became Hyde Park, the grounds built to the Columbian Exposition. Were these brothers aware that 40 years later they would be constructing the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition in this location? You can clearly see from these official construction photographs that this is not wood, and these buildings were not temporary. Maybe some did have wood added, but was this just to repair what was already there? On the 16th of April 1857, the upscale Hyde Park house on the shores of Lake Michigan opened, becoming a social hub for the eastern elite of Chicago. By 1861, Hyde Park was incorporated as a private township. Notably, Mary Todd Lincoln stayed there in the summer of 1865 after her husband's assassination. Hyde Park remained independent until 1889, when it was then annexed by Chicago. Shortly after, on the 1st of October 1891, the University of Chicago was established in Hyde Park, backed financially by John Davison Rockefeller and William Rainey Harper. So why did the Eastern elites choose this location? What was in this location before it was purchased by Paul Cornell? Just 4 years after annexation, Hyde Park in Chicago then hosted the 1893 World's Fair, transforming the United States of America from an emerging nation into a global economy, and fueling the concept of American exceptionalism and American first. Chicago Day was held on the 9th of October 1893 and drew over 750,000 visitors in a single day, the world record for outdoor event attendance at that time. These photographs depict the neoclassical architecture buildings that were constructed for the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition and that were supposed to be temporary. Yet the structures appear monumental and durable. Anyone would question whether they were truly meant to be dismantled after 12 months or less. There are too many inconsistencies with the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition or the Chicago's World Fair, since the World Fairs were controlled by planning committees and held regularly. It's astonishing how quickly the World's Fairs were built, usually in less than 12 months. The entire 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, with its buildings, lakes, bridges and infrastructure, was assembled rapidly, raising many questions about the actual reasons for their construction. The dedication of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition was dated to happen in October 1892, with this opening involving Masonic groups, suggesting that many of these structures might have already been completed by them. Interestingly, the dedication marked 400 years since Columbus's voyage, yet the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition did not start until the 1st of May 1893. This timeline hints at a possible esoteric agenda or occult agenda, further fueling speculation about concealed motives behind the construction of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition. Details about the construction of the 1893 World's Fair are scarce, and the narrative around the Chicago World's Fair rapid building schedule raises so many questions. The involvement of influential financiers like J.P. Morgan or Cornelius Vanderbilt and William Waldorf Astor, who pledged millions of US dollars, indicates that financial interests heavily influenced the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition. Lyman Judson Cage, a prominent banker and former Secretary of the Treasury, played an essential role. He was the president of the Chicago World's Fair Planning Board and also director of the largest bank in the Midwest. Lyman Judson Cage even hired renowned landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted to design parts of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition. An American politician known as Carter Henry Harrison III, who was mayor of Chicago and served as mayor from 1879 until 1887, was another interesting figure. He promoted the Chicago World's Fair as showcasing the true Chicago. What did he mean by this statement? Were these buildings from the old world empire of Great Tartary or Great Tartaria? Was this part of the true America? During the 28th of October, just before the ending of this World's Fair, Carter Henry Harrison III was assassinated by Patrick Eugene Prendergast, an Irish Catholic immigrant with a somewhat murky background. The given narrative claims Patrick Eugene Prendergast was reclusive, yet he reportedly published a newspaper and was involved in campaigns supporting Harrison. The timing of his death and the ending of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, or Chicago's World Fair, raises questions about whether there was more beneath the surface. So what was the true Chicago? The structures of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, built of lightweight materials, seemingly endured the harsh winters of Chicago, with its freezing temperatures and heavy snow, only to be demolished in 1894. Yet the photographs of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition show buildings that seem surprisingly durable and even superior in appearance to some skyscrapers of the modern period. Over 27 million American citizens visited, and among them was Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, a notorious serial killer who operated a building full of trapdoors, subterranean passages and tunnels, possibly connected to a network of comparable structures used for nefarious purposes during the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. By the 31st of March 1894, all the temporary structures of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition were dismantled and the landmass was repurposed. The University of Chicago now occupies part of the site. Its Illumi song includes lines referencing the Chicago World's Fair, calling it the White City, a nickname for the various World's Fairs. The White City amusement park that opened on the site during the 26th of May 1905 was considered the largest on planet Earth. As we've gone through these photographs by Charles Arnold, one thing you will notice is the lack of photos that contain construction workers. We are given the excuse that people were not in the pictures due to slow exposure times, yet Charles Arnold captured the crowds that attended all the ceremonial days, in which there were hundreds of thousands of people. But do we see a motion blur? From our research, the reason we don't see many construction workers is because these buildings were founded and were actually part of the Old World Empire of Great Tartaria. The narrative of the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, or 1893 Chicago's World Fair, seems to be a controlled message to shape perception and memory of the American people. We are only covering some of the details to the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, but once you look at the given narrative, you begin to see that it is very likely that buildings at the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition were previously here, which then further suggests the narrative we have been told about the United States of America is fabricated, distorted, or a complete lie. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also join the member section where we have lots of exclusive content. See you in the next video.